All right, joining us to talk about several issues is our new senator in Pennsylvania. Senator Pat Toomey is with us on the new Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Hey, Senator, first time I can call you that on the air. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Good evening, Dom. Thanks for having me.
Well, Senator Toomey, I don't know, I haven't seen anything that you've said, but just give me your overall thoughts and tell us your thoughts now. There seems to be a heightened look at protecting people like you and the people in Congress.
Well, first of all, you can't hear about this without reacting with just revulsion and horror. Your heart goes out to the people who lost their lives and to Congresswoman Giffords, who's struggling to hold on to hers. It's just appalling. But I really think we shouldn't lose sight of the very unusual nature of this. It's a completely isolated incident. It's an obviously deranged individual. And fortunately, this is a very rare occasion with respect to people in public life. But it's a certain vulnerability that does exist. I just think we should keep it in context, keep it in perspective, and remember how rare this is.
That is exactly where I am, Senator. Now, Congressman Brady, who's a friend of the show, but I think is just going down exactly the wrong path on this. We haven't seen the bill yet, but the outline of the bill is, these using the crosshairs and all that. Democrats and Republicans have used this in various ads. That would be a federal crime, apparently.
Oh, my goodness. Bill. Oh, I think that's really grossly overreacting. Look, rhetoric sometimes gets a little carried away. Sometimes people use imagery and metaphors that are a little unfortunate. I think both sides do that. It's not that big a deal, and it does not. There's no evidence that incites violence. I mean, this guy was deranged. It's obvious to anybody just looking at what we know at this point, and I'm sure we'll learn more. But it's obvious that he's unhinged. People have gotten a little carried away with their rhetoric for many years, and that hasn't resulted in people getting shot and killed. So I think that's an overreaction.
Absolutely. The other piece to this, too, and it comes into the politics of the policy of this, Senator, is the idea that those like you and I that are for smaller government, less regulation, lower taxes, somehow or another, that's provoking because this guy seemed to be against all authority in some garbled way. I don't think he was provoked by militia, anti-government sorts of approach that if you're for lesser government, suddenly you're calling for violence.
Well, I think Pennsylvanians and Americans know better than to fall for that. Again, it's giving this guy way too much credit to suggest that he was guided by any philosophy or any rational thought process. He was insane. There is no rational explanation for what he did. It was driven by his own insanity. There's no evidence. Again, I'm not aware of any evidence that ideologues on either the left or the right have resorted to violence in this country. This guy is an outlier who doesn't fit into the political spectrum. He fits into the spectrum of those who are mentally incompetent, it seems, or at least what we would consider deranged and insane. That's a whole different problem.
Exactly. Let's get on to the policy matters coming up. One is the debt ceiling. How does Pat Toomey, I wanted to hear you see the vote on that coming up.
Well, it's a very interesting and a very important vote. I think it's an important opportunity to say, look, we can't just keep raising the debt limit and just continue to run massive deficits and racking up more debt. If we're going to raise the debt ceiling, I think we ought to demand that in return we get substantive legislative statutory caps on spending, limitations on spending, process reforms that will allow us to get on a sustainable budgetary path, and we're not on one now. And the idea that we should just go along and just raise the debt ceiling because, we can't consider any alternative, I think is a mistake.
Well, I think that's very sober because, the other side is the Chicken Little. The world will end if we don't do that, but if we seem to raise this debt ceiling, then we'll hear that same argument down the road.
It's funny, in 2006, President Obama voted against raising the debt ceiling, as you know, and he was very clear. He said, continuing to just raise the debt ceiling, and I'm paraphrasing, but the gist of it was that that's an abrogation of leadership, an act of irresponsibility. Well, he was right then, but the same argument holds true now. So, again, I wouldn't say we should categorically oppose raising the debt ceiling because it's very disruptive if we actually didn't raise the debt ceiling. But what we should do is absolutely insist that we use this as an opportunity to force the kind of fiscal discipline that we've long needed.
I like your thinking. That's an aggressive approach to this without saying let's play a game of chicken or apocalypse now here. One other area, the healthcare reform vote, the vote to repeal, I guess will happen. Do you have any sense what happened in the House next week?
Well, I'm pretty confident the House is going to vote successfully to repeal this bill. Virtually every Republican, if not probably every single Republican, or nearly so, will vote to repeal it. Might be a few Democrats will vote to repeal it. Actually, I think there will be. Now, then the bill comes over to the Senate, and Harry Reid, the Democratic majority leader, has made it very clear he will not put such a bill on the Senate floor. So we will not have, he controls the floor. So we will not have an opportunity to vote to repeal it, as I would vote, if we could. But that's not the end of the story, Dom. As you know, this bill is enormously expensive to implement, and Congress controls the purse strings of the government, at least to some degree. And so we can use that constitutional power to limit the funding of the bureaucracies that would implement this bill. I think we should postpone the implementation, and the 2012 presidential election will be in part a referendum on this bill. And we should preserve the option of repealing it then when we might have a president who would sign such a repeal into law.
Parting question for you. I remember, and I think it was last year on my show around this time, you're the one that's told me first about the end-of-life counseling and how maybe not death panels, but, it had a certain in the air approach to seniors to saying the good thing to do is to get out of the road those last year or 6 months of life if a person is terminal, etc. And then the president doesn't put that up for a vote in the bill itself, but by regulation puts that into play. What can be done if he tries to use the health care bill and then through regulation expand it?
Well, this is, you're touching on a broader issue, Dom, because the administration is using the regulatory agencies to try to implement all kinds of policies that they can't get the legislation for. Cap and trade, various other kinds of energy policy, regulating the internet, possibly card check. So it's a long list, and I think this is, again, an opportunity where the wisdom of the founders was to give Congress significant control of the purse strings. And that means we can control the funding for these regulatory bodies, these agencies. And if they're going to go and run off in a way that's inconsistent with what the American people want, as expressed by their elected representatives, then we should deny them the funding to do it. This battle isn't over. The president doesn't get to do anything he likes. This is supposed to be a government where we have equal partners in this, the legislative branch and the executive branch. And I think it's up to Congress to step up and defend the interests of the American people.
Well, we're counting on you, certainly, Senator. Thank you so much. And again, you are welcome here. It's great to say Senator to me.
Well, thanks very much, Dom. I appreciate being on. I look forward to being back.
All right, Senator Pat Toomey with us here on the New Talk Radio 1210 WPHT. Let me